Okay, good morning, sixth graders. It has been a week since I've spoken to you, talked to you from my downstairs basement. Still working on music stuff here. And I hope you are too, and I hope you are all well and feeling good. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about. Oh, I can't point at it. Over there. It's this way. The Romantic era. You can see I'm having fun with my camera and my extra PowerPoint. Anyway, the Romantic era really is all about Beethoven. So when we first went into our quarantine, we were talking about Bach. Then last week we talked a little bit about Mozart, and I hope you watched that video. Pretty cool, right? And now today it's really all about Beethoven and the Romantic era. Speaking of Beethoven, let's listen before we even jump in here. That's nice music. Now, before you get the misconception that Romantic era is all about romance and, going to the movies and holding hands with your special someone, that's really not what it's about. When we talk about the Romantic era, what we're really talking about is music and its connection to emotion. And the composers of this era, including Beethoven, really focused on emotion. So we're going to hear a lot of music that's really charged with emotion, and you can kind of contrast that with our classical composers. We talked about them really following the rules. Romantic composers were really interested in breaking the rules. So let's get right to it. So as you can see, the dates are 1825 to 1900. And we really think of Ludwig van Beethoven as a transition figure. What do we mean? He's the guy who changed everything. He started out as a classical composer, and then he moves into Romantic all by himself. He broke the rules, he rewrote the rules, and all other composers at that time followed. So what did he do to break all these rules? Well, a couple of things. You can see them over here. Over here in the PowerPoint. He wrote music that celebrated nature. If you heard a Beethoven piece of music, you could imagine sometimes a thunderstorm or a beautiful field with maybe some sheep grazing or something like that. So he liked to write music that would make you think about nature. He wrote music that was very, very proud of his country. So we call this the rise of nationalism. And Beethoven's pretty famous for this idea of being a composer who's also an artist. And because he's an artist, you can't fully understand what he's going through. If you know anything about Beethoven, you know he kind of had, he was famous for a fiery temper. And this all kind of came from his own mental perspective. He just, he was really unique. We'll just say that. Okay. The last thing that Beethoven did that was unique was that he also relied on public support rather than patronage. Now, what do we mean when we say patronage? Patronage means that somebody wealthy is going to pay you to do something. Beethoven didn't like that idea because if somebody wealthy was going to pay him, that meant that he had to do what the rich person asked. So Beethoven wanted to write his own music, the things that were in his heart. There you go, more emotion, romantic. And so he did not rely on necessarily wealthy people to hire him. He was the first person to write music and then to sell tickets. So if you wanted to come see his music, all you needed was a ticket. Pretty cool. If we were in school, we would add this to our listening log. But I'm just going to point out to you that Symphony Number 5 in C minor is so famous. You probably knew that Beethoven went deaf during his lifetime. He found this very, very depressing. And just about this time, he was so depressed, he wrote a letter to a friend. And in that letter, he said, "The one sense in me that should be perfect is going away." At the same time, he wrote this piece of music that starts with a very, very famous motif. Dun, 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 right? Everybody's heard that before. And Beethoven mentioned that to him, he literally was writing a piece of music where death was knocking at his door. So that little motif, da-da-da-dum, was really death's knock. So just a little bit of the Symphony Number 5 in C minor. This is the first movement, and we have here an orchestra. And I'm hoping not to blast you with this. So here we go. Symphony Number 5. Okay, and I'm expecting probably everybody's heard that piece of music before at some point in your life, but maybe we've only listened to the first part of it. Boy, if you have time, listen to the whole thing because it is really, really amazing music. And just as a contrast, you can hear a lot of fire in that music and a lot of anger. And, when we first started out, I was playing for you a little piece of piano music that's just so calm and soothing. I think it's interesting to think that the same person wrote these two pieces of music. So, emotions and the wide range, that's what really romantic period's about. Okay? What does it mean to be romantic? Well, we talked a little bit about what Beethoven did, but I always like to show you a painting from the same era. So this is a painting that is pretty famous from the Romantic era. And if we were in class, we would have been having a discussion together. But I want you to just look at this painting and think about what the artist was trying to show us. Now, some responses I get from kids sometimes when they see this, they'll say that this person just went on a hike and is admiring nature, right? Again, we mentioned nature with Beethoven. Other people will say this person is looking at a stormy sea. It's kind of hard to tell if those clouds are waves. Is that water? Is that more landscape? We don't really know. I've also had people say, looks like he's holding something in his hand there. Is that just a walking stick? Or is that a sword? Are we talking about somebody who's getting ready to go to war? He is alone. I think that's one thing that's very, very romantic. This person seems isolated and by himself. So there's kind of, I would use the word brooding, almost kind of depressing kind of look to him. He doesn't look happy necessarily. He looks kind of sad. And that's very, very romantic. Alone, he's brooding. He's thinking about his thoughts. My cat is meowing in the background. I don't know if you could hear that. I hope you couldn't. Anyway, he's thinking about his own thoughts, and I think this guy's pretty lonely at least, and maybe even depressed. So kind of recognizing that side of life, that things aren't always happy and things aren't always great, but just that things can sometimes go wrong. And I'm laughing because my cat's looking at me now. What are you looking at? I'm working. Oh, okay. Okay, so a couple attributes of romantic music and thought. Music celebrated the natural and also the supernatural. And I always like to point out that Mary Shelley wrote the novel Frankenstein here in the Romantic era. We have the rise of nationalism. We talked about that, patriotic music. And we think patriotic music, things like national anthems, those were all composed at this time. There's also the rise of program music. Now, in elementary school, your elementary teachers should have shown you something called Peter and the Wolf. And they may or may not have, but Peter and the Wolf is an example of a full story told with just the music. There aren't any words, there's no text, but just that idea of music kind of telling the whole story. And then last but not least, we have the disappearance of the patronage system. In other words, wealthy people hiring musicians to make music. And if you think about it, nowadays, if you want to go see a concert, we buy tickets, don't we? So patronage system is sort of still around, but really more or less we're buying tickets to the things we want to see and hear. There are many, many, many composers. In fact, composing becomes kind of a cool job in the Romantic period. So all of these people, I keep doing this wrong way. All of these people in your PowerPoint are people you may have heard of, people like Schubert and Mendelssohn and Chopin, Schumann and Verdi. And yes, we have I'm doing it the wrong way again. Clara Schumann, we have a female composer finally. Girls might think, oh my gosh, women were never composers. That is entirely untrue. In fact, there were many, many female composers. It just, unfortunately, it was very hard to be published as a woman. So Clara Schumann was the first one who kind of stepped out there and got her pieces published. And then last but not least, Peter Tchaikovsky. You're probably familiar with the Nutcracker. We always hear that around the holiday season. At the very least, you've heard his music, and that again would be romantic music. Okay, that is everything, sixth graders, about romantic music that I needed you to know. There is a forms follow-up, some questions there for you to answer. Very, very easy. I've also included a little video of a flash mob playing a very famous piece of music from Beethoven, the Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy. So amazing. And there's a flash mob that you're going to view from this little town in Spain where they decided to just kind of like have musicians come out on the street and start playing this thing. So I think it's pretty awesome. I want you to watch that as part of your background for Beethoven. Thanks so much for watching and doing these assignments. Thank you. And I do hope to see you guys all soon. Ode to Joy is all about being hopeful, and I am hopeful that we will get to see each other one day soon. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you. Do answer the questions and have a great day.